Well, today we are at the Verala Paper Mill Museum. This paper mill was a working paper mill from the early 1800s to about 1960. This map shows the location of the mill. It was located on a river. The river provided power for the mill and the little village around the mill. This is some of the very interesting buildings, very interesting industrial architecture. This building says 1893. This must have been one of the more modern buildings. This is a part of the guided tour through the museum. You can see the English indications of the various sections of the mill. We'll have a guided tour. I think the guided tour will be in English. This is a part of the small carts or wagons that were pushed. You can see the little turntable. All this was operated by hand to move the logs and the paper from one section of the mill to the other. This is another view of the Verala mill from the outside. We are waiting for the tour to begin. This building that you see is the drying building where the wet paper was placed for individual sheets for drying. The smokestack is a part of the heating system.
That was the mill bell, and the bell was rung every morning at 6 o'clock when the working day started. Okay, the unbarked logs were floated to the mill and they were hoisted from the river with a hose. This place was about 200 meters that way, and first these logs were stored near the hoist. Here in the mill they used logs that were over 1 year old because they were much more lighter to handle. And the circular saw operators pushed these carts to the mill, and in the 1920s they got a horse to help them. So it was a tough job for them. This was spruce wood that was used in the manufacturing process of garden pulp and board. Only spruce and water. Those were the raw materials. 3 circular saw operators worked here, and the first one cut the logs into pieces that were half a meter long with this circular saw. The second worker had actually the easiest job here because he just lifted these blocks on the table. And this is a debarking machine. So the worker here rotated this block by hand against this revolving blade of the machine. The blade rotated 600 times a minute, and it had 4 of these kind of knife blades here. So you have to be really careful and skillful unless you wanted to get rid of your fingers.
Yeah, that looks like the most dangerous
yeah, it is.
job.
But it's amazing, only one accident has actually happened here. One trainee got his fingers here, but he was quite proud of his job, and the story has it that he had said afterwards that the job was actually easier to do here with short fingers. The barking wastes were let outside through this pipe, and they were used as fuel in the heating center of the drying loft.
So these logs are from when the plant was shut down,
yeah.
1964.
So this one here is a grinding stone. It's from Scotland, weighs about 3 tons, 3,000 kilograms. So this is natural stone, some kind of sandstone, quality Scottish sandstone. And all these stones were brought here from Scotland. And a similar stone is lying inside a grinding machine, grinder, here, inside the machine. These two grinders were acquired here in 1903, and these were already made in Finland. There was one worker per machine, and he went around this machine all the time, inspected and filled these pockets with these blocks, compressed them against the stone, and there was an egocentric wheel here in the middle, and when it rotated it made these shafts go like this, to and fro. So this had a ratchet feed, an automatic feed. And when some water came from the pipes, quite soon the groundwood pulp or some kind of groundwood slurry began to form. And one machine had a grinding capacity of 17 cubic meters wood a day. The whole process took 43 cubic meters of spruce wood a day. Of that, 5 tons were made into board, 10 tons into, 5 tons made into groundwood pulp and 10 tons into board. Here on the other side you can see the stone in the machine. And there's also a sharpening wheel. And the foreman inspected the freeness of the product, and if he was not satisfied with the quality of the groundwood pulp, then the stone had to be sharpened all over with this sharpening wheel. And of course, when the stones were sharpened from time to time, they got smaller in use, and that's why once a year the stones had to be changed. It was quite a job because all these top parts of the machine had to be removed. All men workers of the factory were needed for the job, and it took 1 weekend to change the stones. So all these machines, there were 3 machines here.
I don't see a lift. How was the stone lifted
they had
in?
some kind of tackles up there.
Oh, I see. In the ceiling.
Yeah, in the ceiling. Of course, it was too heavy just to lift by hand.
And this machine was made in Finland?
Yes, in Finland. And in the very beginning, there were 2 machines from Germany. They had only 5 pockets, so this was a huge leap forward. Like they had 8 pockets in 1903. But most machines were made in Germany in the beginning. And, between the metal part and the stone that was not grinded, and those splinters were removed here. But the groundwood slurry flowed down.
So the splinters meaning the large pieces of wood.
Yeah. Here are the sorters of the slurry. They sorted the slurry according to its freeness again. And in the end, it flowed down to those 8 wet lab machines downstairs, to the pipes. 1922, and it used a thermal grinding method. It had a hydraulic feed, and the stone is there upright position. So this has a horizontal shaft. And you can see those 3 holes where the wooden blocks were put in.
And this was also electric driven.
No, these were not electric driven, these machines. They used, like there was a water turbine behind the wall. They used to do a shaft go through the wall.
Oh, I see.
So all these grinders were operated by water turbines, water power, till the very end. All other machines used electricity, stone. But you can see these long main shafts all over in the mill.
Yes.
And bell-driven machines.
So this was the main drive shaft for this room.
One of them. So you can see
So this was the
all these are wet lap machines.
wet lap machine room.
So the main shaft is made of metal, but you can see there's a big cogwheel down there. All the teeth for that cogwheel are made of wood, white beech. That was quite clever because only the wooden parts got damaged in use. When they used the loose teeth, they were easy to replace by another false teeth. So it would have caused quite a big foundry work if those metal parts would have damaged.
That's right.
So, no, they only managed with these loose teeth. Small machines. So all these machines were belt driven so they could be operated at the same time.
Now this is the wooden gear.
Yes. So this kind of teeth were used in the coupling. White beech was imported from Central Europe. It was really hard and good wood. It lasts like 5 years in use, this kind of tooth. And through this hole, they pushed a metal stick.
Mm-hmm.
And it was locked. Locked in the wheel like this. Okay. And the excess water was removed through this sheet and through this cylinder. But these had to be sewn together by, or with a metal string here, by hand, and the worker would sew like 2 or 3 inches a day. It was really tough job. Like here's the result of the other cylinder. It's really mainly work. Like here. Of course, no extra marks were allowed in the sheets, so. And the seam of the wire had to be sewn very carefully. Groundwood pulp came from the pipes to this head box of the machine. It started to flow down through these pools, and here's the wire that removed the excess water from the groundwood pulp. And there was a middle part in the middle, and it divided the groundwood pulp in 2 lines to the spilt. And the sheets began to form on this rotating cylinder of the machine, layer by layer. Now, when the desired thickness was attained, a little wheel came in contact with the sheet, and it, of course, rotated them.
Mm-hmm.
And then a bell chimed, and now these sheets were ready for being removed. All the machines had their distinctive notes, so that the workers knew that, okay, it's my machine that is now ringing. All the workers here were women. They used this kind of stick made of juniper and slid the lap by pushing the stick along this groove in the cylinder. Now this rotated all the time, so you had to be really skillful. You had to hit the groove at the right time. You could easily go like this, and then the sheets would have been spoiled. And the stick was made of juniper because juniper won't split easily, so it lasted long, sharp use. It was also good because the workers had to make these sticks themselves in their spare time. They could use company forest, but they had to take care of their tools themselves. At a time, 4 sheets were formed. They were measured 70 by 100 centimeters. They were stacked here on the table in 5 centimeter, separated by metal sheets or plywood. And there is a press where the excess water was removed from the sheets. And actually at this stage the groundwood pulp earmarked for sale was ready for packing and baling. It was sold as wet groundwood pulp to paper mills, so it was used in paper making. But most sheets were dried and glazed here at Verala, so they were made in the board. And next we'll go to the board and drying loft and see how these board sheets were dried there.
It's kind of head box, so it's obviously an open head box, and it flowed through these various pools, as you say, and they kind of overflowed, I guess, from one section to another, and then onto the wire, where a lot of the water went through the wire.
Yeah, it went through the wire.
And then there was a layer of pulp on the wire, and it was picked up by this felt.
Yep.
And the felt really transported it over to the metal cylinder. Was this type of lap machine common at this era?
Yeah, it was really common. Like there were about 15 rubber pulp factories in Finland by the turn of the century, and basically in all these factories they use these kind of wet lap machines. If it was a groundwood pulp and board factory, of course, paper mills had their own machines. They never used these automation here.
So it was still about 50%.
Wet groundwood pulp.
Yes.
To paper mills. So this is a hydraulic press.
How long would the board stay in the press?
Well, not for long, just for the pressing stage.
Hmm.
And it's decided that this will be constructing of brick. And this was constructed in quite an interesting way, because the new brick walls were constructed around the old mill, so there were no interruptions in production.
And the brick building was, you say, 1880?
1893.
93, I see. And it continued to 1964.
Here's installed here in high piles. 83 cubic meters of firewood were needed per day for heating the drying loft. That was twice as much as what took the whole manufacturing process itself, so it was quite an amount. The heat firewood himself from the yard inside, and it was quite a job because he had to work 7 days a week. Other workers usually had their Sundays off, but the stoker had to take care that the temperature was high all the time here in the drying loft. So
What was the temperature about in the drying loft?
it was like from 70 to 75 degrees centigrade, so
I
like
see.
sauna.
Oh, yes.
It's generated here in the drying loft by leading the combustion gases through the big pipe system here in the basement. And of course the gases were let outside through pipes, but when the pipes here were glowing red hot, the temperature ended up till 70 to 75 degrees centigrade. And the sheets can dry here in about 3 or 4 days. Okay, let's go to the first floor. It took a few hours more to get dried. So this drying loft is divided in 2 equal parts by the fireproof wall. While on the other side the drying process was going on, the other side was emptied and refilled with wet sheets. The work was performed by women. They stood on these loose planks here, and there are these metal fasteners in 7 layers without any roofs in between, so it was quite dangerous to go up there just on these loose planks. So the women worked in pairs. The other girl gave the sheets to the lady who stood on the plank, and she hung them up. And these girls were called crows because they worked like birds in a tree. The heating was off for the working hours, but it was really hot anyway, so like 40 degrees centigrade. So the women worked here half naked basically. No men workers were allowed to come here at all to see the ladies work here, except the foreman, of course. He was privileged. And the sheets could dry in 3 to 4 days. In 1910, the summer drying loft was constructed It was well air conditioned, so it had all kind of vents and holes to allow the air currents to circulate in the building. And if the weather was good, the sheets could dry in about 3 weeks there. And these wooden fasteners, called devil's teeth, were used in the summer drying loft. The village carpenter, Matti Mustonen, had made all these teeth himself by hand, and there were about 40,000 pieces of them there. So it was quite a job for one man.
So this summer drying loft used no heat. It was just
No.
it was just a natural heat from the sun and more of a solar drying.
So the summer drying loft used to look like air currents circulated in the building, and that's how the sheets were dried there.
This was probably a nice place to work in the winter, though.
Well, not the summer. Well, this place.
Yes,
Course, yeah,
this place in the winter.
Yeah, but it was really hot to work here anyway.
So
we
if
had to take some breaks, go to the snow or something, because it was really hot here. 40 degrees centigrade. It's really hot.
So you say they were making about 10 tons of board a day. So this building would hold about 30 tons with 3 days worth of drying.
In the calendar room, the 2 calendars were in the same room where we saw the film. So these sheets were pushed through the steam heated cylinders of the calendars and got slightly glazed and compressed on both sides. But now when the whole manufacture process was over, all the sheets with different weights had been mixed up, and that's why all sheets had to be sorted separately here with this hand scale. And the numbers here indicated how many sheets there were to 50 kilograms, and the mill preferred numbers from 50 to 120. The thicker or thinner substances could be made. So this is about 60 pieces to 50 kilograms.
So each sheet was weighed.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's 100% sampling.
You can see
all the qualities, their own boxes.
The different different weight.
160 sheets to 50 kilograms. But now this place here is really famous. The woman in the middle of the picture, Maria Mattsson, worked by the scale altogether for 51.5 years, doing the same job in the same place every day. And actually you're standing on her footprints on the floor. Now, when she stood in the same place, so here's the result. 51.5 years doing the same job in the same place. So famous footprints on the floor. And actually when Maria got old, her eyesight got weaker, so she couldn't recognize these numbers anymore on the scale. Story has it that by that time she could measure these sheets with her fingertips. And of course the other workers were suspicious, can we trust Maria anymore? Because sometimes she put these sheets in the boxes without using the scale at all. And of course the other workers told the foreman about this, and the foreman checked all these boxes, but surprisingly there were no mistakes. So Maria was allowed to work here for very long, like she was 77 years old when she at last retired. But even then on one condition, if there was an emergency here in the factory, they would have asked her to come back. So it was real dedication to the Verala mill. Sheets were packed into bales of 200 kilograms in this press. So the packers start by putting 200 kilograms sheets under the press with this kind of frame, wooden frame on both sides, and the package was bound with these iron hoops. With necessary markings and stamps, the bales were ready for shipment, and the closest station was the Selänpää station. It was about 7 kilometers away from Verala. And
That was a railroad station?
yeah, that was a railway station. So they used horse cars to carry these bales there. And even the sewage water was cycled back to the machines, to the grinders. The foreman controlled the production in the mill, and he had his own laboratory where he inspected the freeness of the product. All the lab equipment has been removed here. Okay, there's a date on the wall, 18th of July 1964. That was Saturday, and that was the day the mill was closed down permanently.
Oh, I see.
In 1964.
Now, you say there was one foreman. Was it was the mill run in 3 shifts, or was it run 24 hours a day?
In 3 shifts. So people worked 8 hours a day. It was the final stage in the manufacturing process before the sorting. So the sheets were pushed through the steam heated cylinders of the counters, and they were slightly pinched and compressed on both sides. So there was no other purpose than just making this.
So all boards were calendared then?
Yeah, all board sheets. Here's actually a model of the summer drying loft, which does not exist anymore.
This is that summer drying building.
And all the wooden fasteners were used. There were about 40,000 pieces of them. And a hand-operated lift.
But you say compared to the 3 days with heated, this took 3 weeks.
3 weeks, that's true. These fasteners.
So this was not quite so hot to work in.
No, it's quite pleasant to work in. Summertime, of course, it was not in use at the winter time.
And this was created for extra capacity, additional drying capacity?
Yeah, or to cut heating expenses at the summertime.
This is the dates of the Verala mill, 1872 to 1964. From the view of the Verala mill, to the left was the finishing room with the steam heated calendars, and in the center was where the wood came in and was debarked, and to the right on the top floor was the weighing and packing room, and on the ground floor were the refiners. And as we learned, across this wooden walkway to the drying house, modern drying house built in 1893, a brick construction to eliminate fire.